the conversation is all about assessment. It's all about assessment. And as the handout is now going to come around to you, you're going to see that as we look at these illustrations up here, do you see teaching or testing going on? Let's raise your hand if you think, I see teaching going on. I see testing going on. I see learning going on. So why should there be any difference? Why should there be any difference between the teaching and the testing and the learning? This is the frame for our conversation right now. There should be not a difference between the teaching and the testing and the learning. And it should look more and more like what these kids are doing up here, and less like, here's a piece of paper, would you please fill in a blank? Here's a multiple choice, would you make a guess? Because we are all about what you can do with the language. And what's motivating to a student? When the teaching and the testing and the learning come together and look more like this. So we have to look for opportunities that we can design our teaching and testing and learning to bring students together in meaningful, engaged work. Another layer that I see up here in all three illustrations, raise your hand if you see interpersonal happening there. That conversation back and forth when students have to exchange and negotiate. Okay? I see some possibilities where there could be some exchange and conversation going on. Do you see anything that is interpretive? That's a message coming in at me. Do you see anything that's presentational, a message going out? And I would suggest, also in each of these illustrations, I can't really say exactly what's going on until I hear or listen or see what the students are actually doing. It's not what the teacher is doing, it's what is the student doing. So when they're on their technology, the two on the lower left there, it could be an interpersonal Skype call. It could be they're looking at a website and they're interpreting the information. It could be they're creating a podcast or a presentation. It could be all three. So again, I have to really look carefully at what is the learner doing, not the teacher. What is the learner doing? Now I know, am I covering the modes of communication? And my testing, my teaching, my learning has come together. So there's the big picture for the day. We can wrap it all up right now. But you might want a little more detail. Well, let's unwrap that. And did the handouts get spread around? Thank you, thank you. And our extras, if they need them, are right here in this center table. So again, come on up, join the center table, join the conversation. Well, the handouts are right there. So as we continue thinking about this and having our conversation, I want to model what STARTALK keeps asking you to do, which is put up front your can-do statements. So I have 90 minutes, and during these 90 minutes, this is what I think you will be able to say as you walk out of here. I can do this. I can do all of these things. It's not enough just to put them on the wall. It's not enough just to tell you that this is what you can do. I need proof. I need proof. As you're filling out that lesson template, remember where it says, what is your evidence of learning? What are those checks for understanding? I better practice some of those today in these 90 minutes. Otherwise, you have no idea, and I have no idea, if you really can do these things. So I'm going to be doing a variety of checks, a variety of things in a continuum of layers of assessment. Starting from just some quick checks, some that are more formative, and some that are more summative. So now you've just gotten, again, a good overview for what we're going to be doing during this period of time. So be thinking about all of those, and the questions that I'm going to keep coming back is, well, how do I decide what my assessment needs to look at, the when, and how do I match it to various can-do statements, and how do I move to more independent use of language when you all start to take control? Again, I said, I don't know what mode I'm in until I watch what the learners are doing. What are they doing? Is theirs an interpersonal, an interpretive, or a presentational activity? Now I have an idea. Okay, so let's move forward. And this is the first table talk. You will see underneath on page 1 of your handout, underneath the can-do statements, you will see these 2 questions. And I'd like you to have the conversation at your table. Again, the extras are right in the center there, right over there. Thank you. So we're all here about assessment, but we should really start with a more basic question. Why are we doing this? And after they've gone through this experience of being assessed, what are we going to do with that information? Why did I make them do that? Why did I make them do that? So have that conversation at your table. If your table is more than 4 people, divide into 2. Turn and talk. Let's come back together in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We're all quiet. Thank you. All right, perfect. So rather than taking the time to go to each table and hear what your conversation was, it was an engaged conversation. I appreciate you jumping in and doing that. So rather than checking in, I'm going to check this way. This is just my quick check that, did you talk about what you were supposed to talk about? So I want you to think what your conversation felt like, the things you said, and I want you to compare it to a group that I asked these same questions of recently, and here are their responses. I kind of paraphrased them a little bit, but this is what I was hearing from that group. And I'd like you to compare it with your conversation and nod, kind of, tap your neighbor and say, yeah, we said that. And also look for things that you would like to add to this list. What is not here that was part of your conversation? So just take a few moments, look through the list, compare it to yours. And after you say, yeah, we said something, we said it in different words, but it was kind of the same idea. But do we have a new idea to add? Any new ideas you'd like to add? Yes, please, sir.
Well, not so much a new idea, sorry. I was just going to comment that first bullet, feedback from students, definitely came up. But then that related item to the last bullet, I don't think, wasn't articulated as clearly, and I think it's nice to have that metacognition.
Nice. So it's not just feedback like you got an 83, you got a B minus, you got 9 out of 10. That's not effective feedback because that doesn't relate to what they know and can do. So if my feedback relates to what am I trying to accomplish, we have a nice closing of that loop. Thank you. Thank you. Nice to put those as the bookends. Wow. Any other comments, thoughts related to your conversations?
So do we need to assess students in the beginning too, for the placement purpose?
Maybe for placement to know what they can do. And again, so I'm trying to find out where they are so I know what to do next. That could be another way of interpreting that particular statement. At the very beginning, I want to know where they are so I know how to start, how to get them going. Okay? Or I might find that out. It doesn't have to be, again, a formal assessment. Let's sit down, and it's going to take an hour, and now I know everything you know about speaking Arabic. It may be some informal things that give me the sense of, where are you? You came into this program with this amount of prior experience. You're here for your 3rd STARTALK program. Comment?
Sometimes I use low-stakes assessment to preview the kinds of questions that are going to appear in high-stakes tests.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, and so we might be using slightly different terms of low stakes, high stakes, but I think that same idea is going to come in. Where does it come in my lesson plan related to your curriculum template? I'm bringing you back to the STARTALK documents, and this is the one we're going to be spending more time on, your lesson planning template, but it's informed, of course, by your larger curriculum goals, low stakes, high stakes, day to day, moment by moment, versus what can you do by the end of the program. Well, this is an awful lot being placed on assessment. I don't think there's one assessment, one type, low, high, formative, summative, that can do it all. So we have to think about, how do I differentiate my assessments to answer the questions that I have, to serve the purpose that I have? Otherwise, I'm just randomly doing something and hoping that I get the answer I need, hoping that students get the information they need. So I'm putting it into the sense of, we are trying to reflect and give feedback at different points of our students' language learning journey. Hence the metaphor. We're trying to, again, reflect and give them feedback on where they are in their journey of language learning. Well, I would say that when we are right up close, when it's just happened just now, I just call that a quick learning check. It might be a thumbs up, thumbs down. It might be a, do you think it's A, raise your right hand? Do you think it's B, raise your left hand? It's a quick learning check. It's sort of to just take the pulse. Do I think something happened here? Okay. Yes. Just real quick. A thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Okay.
If I say, today is Thursday, yes or no? And I can quick check comprehension, you go, didn't make sense.
Right.
The problem with that is,
Right hand
we
and
are
left hand,
all,
you said
I said right and left hand could be raised. If it's A, if it's B, that's just a quick check.
Right.
If I maybe put a prompt up here, do you think A or B? What is, maybe we were reading a story, and what do you think is going to happen next, A or B? A is going to happen next, B is going to happen next. Problem with that is, we watch the smartest person in the room and do exactly what he or she does, right? We get a general sense, but those who hesitate, I'm thinking they're not really sure, and they're kind of looking around, yeah, okay, right? But it gives me, again, that sense, a general sense of the room, okay? So that's maybe only has some limited purposes, but it is a type of quick assessment. Formative is not just you have that quick piece, but you can do something with it. So I move you closer to what I'm actually working towards as my ending performance, piece by piece by piece. So maybe I learned 5 vocabulary words, and maybe I learned how to create a sentence about I like. Well, can you put them together and say, well, what do you like most when we go on a picnic? Well, I like, and I'm going to choose some of the things from the list. There was a more formative check because it's not just the vocabulary, it's not just can you say I like, it's can you do something together. Can you use and apply those things? If you look at page 2, you'll see these questions reflected at the top. As a way to bring some sense of this conversation around assessment, what do we do with all that information? Okay? The last is the summative. What have you actually acquired? What have you actually acquired? One of the things I want you to keep in mind, the further I go towards my summative, the less I worry about every mistake. Let me say that again. The closer I get to my end point, my summative assessment, the less I worry about every mistake. Because if I kept telling you for 3 weeks, your pronunciation doesn't work, your pronunciation doesn't work, no, you need to say it exactly like this, come on, say it like this. That's like too much information. I'm just trying to say I like these 3 things on a picnic. Did you understand me? For a novice, I get closer and closer to what is my real performance goal when I get to the summative. I can get much higher accuracy when it's just, all you have to think about are these 5 words. All you have to do is think about the pattern I like. All you have to think about is thumbs up, thumbs down. I can get really high accuracy there, but I get very realistic about what is novice, what is intermediate, what is advanced when I get close to my summative. Okay? We'll come back to that idea. Just wanted to plant that seed. So I took those ideas you were looking at before, and I just put them into those 3 buckets. In the literature, a few people kind of tease out those quick learning checks as slightly different from formative, but we would consider them part of that larger umbrella of formative assessment. Because in all cases, I'm trying to find out just, did you get something? And I think more formatively, and can you do something with it? So I never want to just stop at learning check, learning check, learning check, learning check, boom, 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 boom. I have to find out really quickly, can you do something with it? Can those new words we learned today, can you hook them up with something you learned yesterday and bring those 2 together? Now we're connecting it. To me, that's a very good formative piece. It's not going to take me an hour, it's not going to be a 10-minute, it's not even going to be a 2-minute talk with your partner. It's going to be something quick that I can see, oh, this is what you can do. We're going to give a lot of examples of each type of these assessments, a lot in that formative range. But you'll see at the bottom of that chart that you're looking at on page 2, I'm asking you to reflect throughout the hour that we have here, how would you make that decision for your program? How would you make a decision about your program? The various examples that I share, do I think I would use that in my program more as a quick learning check, more as a formative assessment, or more as that end of program summative assessment? is on the STARTALK curriculum template, you're up front. You say, these are our summative assessments. They are there. You've declared those. What we're talking about this morning now is how do we backward design into each day's learning plan. Each day's learning plan. Episode by episode. You've been hearing that word, right? Episode by episode, and what's the evidence of learning? We're going to get really, really close to that. But I think it's just a few things I'd like to point out with this. Notice how in the learning check and the formative, it really informs me almost more than it informs my students. It helps me make my decision. Can I move on? Did you get this? Do you have those words well enough that now we can try to do something with them, or do I need to just practice those words some more? Just learn the words. Learn how to ask questions. Learn how to describe things. Do I need to work on that, different structures, functions, vocabulary? And in the formative as well, I'm just trying to find out, well, can you now tie that to something you learned previously? It's all informed by what we can do at the end. It's at the end when we really are thinking, this is where the motivation of our students are, which is why it's so important STARTALK has you put that summative assessment up front. Because believe me, just raising my hand or putting it down is not the most motivating thing to your students. That's not what they signed up for. They signed up for what your summative assessments say they're going to be able to do. That's what they want. So if we are up front and we tell our students, at the end of this 3-week STARTALK program, you're going to be able to do these summative assessments, they say, sign me up. This sounds really great. This is exactly what I want. I want to talk to real people. I want to look at some real websites, and I want to create a presentation, a Prezi that goes out to kids in our sister school in Shanghai. Wow, how cool is that? If I know that that's the goal, I can put up with then some of the practice things along the way, some of the formative assessments you have me do, because that's just feedback like, oh, can I do that yet? Am I ready to do that? Am I a really good novice yet? Or am I just still struggling with just a few limited things that I can do? Okay, does it make sense how these are going to come together? How it comes back to your curriculum design and your lesson planning? I'm just going to pause. Any big questions how this fits into what you've been talking about the last 24 hours? Yes, please.
Yes, think about the differentiate between learning chat and formative assessment. We use the rules that they commonly and thinking learning chat is at remembering level, but formative assessment is beyond.
Is a little bit of doing, And again, think of formative, I could have put that as an umbrella, and there's sort of like a continuum within formative assessment. Some are just these really quick and fast things, and some are a little bit more time it's going to take. So that is all the formative umbrella. That's the formative umbrella. And STARTALK doesn't really need you to put down all the learning checks. That's just what a teacher does automatically. It's like, oh, those faces look like they didn't quite get it. I better do something quick to see if they got it or not, right? That's a quick learning check. You don't need to put that in your lesson plan, your learning plan. The formatives, and we're going to get more into this, so if I can hold your question, but I'll hear it first.
Thank you. Do we have to have a paper for the assessment? Because I remember last year when somebody visited my program, they were asking me, are you doing assessment? Yes, we are, while teaching, we are assessing that.
So you have to
But
be...
we need a proof.
So let's talk about the variety of ways we might do that, okay?
Yes.
Let's talk about a variety of ways we might do that.
Like a paper.
There doesn't necessarily always have to be a piece of paper. I just had you do this. I had you maybe turn to your partner and let's decide for a picnic tomorrow, what are the 5 things that we better bring because we're trying to be more health conscious. Would you and your partner just decide what's the one sentence you're going to be able to say? There's a formative check that you can put together, that sentence that we've been practicing, with your own personalized picking of the vocabulary that we've learned. There's nothing written down. And every student says, we want to bring, do. And this pair, we want to bring, and we want to bring. Or maybe then they walk around the room and they try to find other people that have a similar list, talk to other pairs, and see which group has the list most close to yours, and then stay with that group. And so once I see there's a group of 4, there's a group of 4, they're ready. Okay, and these 2, I said, okay, well then the rest of you couldn't find anyone like your list. These are going to be unique. We want to hear those too. And now I maybe only have 5 that I have to hear because I have 4, 4, 4, 4, 2, and 2, right? So there were, again, those are all examples of formative assessments, nothing written down on paper. But if in my learning plan, I have put really clearly, that's how I'm going to know that they can do something with what we've learned. the person who comes to observe your program,
Yes.
and every parent and every student is going to say, I know I learned something.
Yes, do we have?
Learning took place. This is the template that they introduced everyone to, the new STARTALK site. It is your student learning plan template. Yes, exactly. That is there. All right. Let me move on. Again, I talked about that gaze on the horizon. And so formative assessment is right here, right now. Right here, right now. When it's right in front of me, it's really clear and sharp in focus, isn't it? So I need to really help you be as accurate as you can right here, right now. So we do work on, can you pronounce those words right? Can you get the tones right in Chinese? Can you make it sound appropriate? Can you write it out? Does it work? Once you move a little bit further down towards that summative assessment, I don't need to be quite so thinking about that because partly it's a little out of focus. And if I talk about every single detail there, it's too much. It's too much. Think about when you're being coached in any sport, any skill. Piano, learning to swim, playing basketball. Practice is all about formative. And I might practice one thing. In baseball, how do you plant your foot to hit? How do you do this? What's the angle? How far back do I swing? All those are pieces I need to learn. And you're going to teach me one, and I'm just going to practice that one thing. And you're going to give me feedback on that. When you're in a real game, your coach doesn't tell you every single thing. They say, the one thing that's going to help you improve is going to be keep your eye on the ball. Right? Because you've given me all the coaching you can possibly in my formative stage. Don't give me the same feedback. Don't make me obsess about all my errors at the summative stage. Tell me what I've done well and what I can do to improve. That's what I need to know at that point. Because I already know formatively, you can do this. You have the skills that you can. You know this, you know this, you know this. Can you put them together? Well, I can put them together pretty well for a beginner. Or I can put them pretty well for someone who's been in 4 years of STARTALK programs, 4 summers of STARTALK programs. Or my family speaks Arabic at home. I can do it well enough to be able to converse with my friends and family at home. So that is the attitude that we bring to this. All right. We also have, and STARTALK has provided for you, if I want to step a little bit outside of the arena of instruction, what I've been doing in my program, the context, because you've given them a lot of practice within one context. It isn't like, well, this is all about going to the zoo for 3 days, and then we talk about, visiting your grandparents for 3 days, and then we pretend like we're going to the market for 3 days, and then we read a story for 3 days, and it's like, I'm really confused. I'm really confused. You stay on one thing. This is all about your, visiting families or being in your community, how communities are different around the world. You spend 3 weeks on that context, which helps bring up my performance. It really does help to bring it up. So Apple is just one step outside of that to say, so my range that I was targeting was maybe novice, mid, novice, high. Use that example. And we practiced all about community. But I want to know, how really novice, mid, novice, high are you? And STARTALK provides free to your programs for your students to individually be assessed in the interpersonal, conversation, and the interpretive this year. They're adding that. So it's listening and reading, messages coming in, and we're going to see a variety of examples, not from Apple, but how you would assess that in your programs in the formative realm. And this is just, again, a good check for your program to get data. We think they're at that novice, mid-novice, high level, but are they really? And so STARTALK provides that to you, and we can talk afterwards if you have more questions about that. And many of you, I'm sure, have heard about the oral proficiency interview, writing proficiency test. How many of you have heard of those? Okay. So those are way off on the horizon. They don't talk about any errors. They say, can you do this? And it is not dependent on how you learned, where you learned, how long you learned, who your family is, any time you spent abroad. It is neutral on all of that. And so that's why it is a different kind of feedback. It's a different kind of assessment. So again, think about what kind of feedback do I give when it's right here in front of me, that formative assessment, this learning episode from the last 15 minutes of my instruction. What's my formative assessment or check here? What kind of feedback do they need? As we move closer and closer to the summative, how do I shift my feedback and shift more towards that final performance for the program in the summative? And if I want to verify, are you really in this range? perhaps use the Apple assessment. Okay. Look again at this quote. Really, really important, because as we focus now really just on that formative piece of this big piece about assessment, if I don't do something with the information, if I don't capitalize on that to move students forward, I've kind of failed. I've kind of failed. So it really is all about that. How can we as educators set ourselves up to collect meaningful information and capitalize on it to move them forward? So it's not just, gotcha, you're not as good as you thought you were. It's like, oh, that has to tell me, the instructor, something. What do I need to do differently tomorrow, the next day, even the next 10 minutes? What do I need to do differently? Because I got some information that's telling me how to be better as your teacher. What do you need? It's a needs assessment. So we have to, if we're really going to be talking about formative assessment, and in the learning plan, that's what it asks for. How are you checking for learning? We have to do something with the results. Okay. All right. This is how we start to bring all of this now into your curriculum planning. So as you're brainstorming your curriculum plan and you're filling it out, I know I often started with something like this. Well, we have a topic, and that's probably what you even put into your proposal. And community is a typical one. Typical, it's all about my community and how my community is the same or different from communities in Turkey, right? In India, whatever it might be. You're assigned to teach community. What are you going to teach? Would you turn and talk to the people at your table again real quickly? This is going to be a speed round, like less than a minute. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. That was not a formative assessment. That was simply a let's all come back to order quick. I was a middle school teacher, so forgive me. Forgive me. I haven't recovered yet. So again, as we did before, I don't need to have you all report out, but again, compare your list to a list I recently received. Does yours look something like that? Yeah, it's really easy to generate this list. So we're all ready to start our STARTALK program. We've got the list of stuff. I see vocabulary. I see a structure. I see some functions, giving directions, describing things. Oh, wait, we forgot culture. Quick, let's add a few culture details. Let's throw that in. Okay, check, 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 check. I'm ready to start teaching, right? Your students are going to say, that's exactly what I want. A pile of stuff, a pile of pieces. It's like giving me the jigsaw puzzle pieces without knowing what the cover looks like of the box. I want to know what the cover of the box is. Why do I need this piece? Oh, because you're going to be doing this in 3 weeks. At the end of the program, you're going to be having a Skype call with, oh, that's why I need to know that. That's why I want that vocabulary. Please, I'm hungry for that vocabulary. Please, I need that structure. Would you practice a little more? I can't quite, it's not in my head yet. Formatively, I checked, and I can tell you don't have it yet. It's just not the pile of stuff. That's the middle column that you put in your plan, your learning plan. It says culture, content, and language. What do learners need to know to meet the can-do statement? They need to know all of this. Okay, so I can teach and I can practice. I can do some learning checks. And in your learning plan it says, please do a formative assessment. Check for learning that they have those things. But do it informed by what they're going to have to do by the end of your program. My quick learning check is, do you know the words? If at the end you're going to have to ask questions, and I want it to be in a format that you're going to have to ask questions about these things. Ask questions, not just tell, but ask. Let's practice asking. So in my assessments, I can start to bring some of these ideas together. We said it's to apply and use what we've learned. So my evidence of learning is you can do something with it, not I have it, I have it, I have it, I have it. This is what we want to be doing. This is how we want to fill in our learning plan down here. Here's column 2. What's missing is an authentic purpose, a real reason to use it. So, well, when would I ever talk about my community? I mean, we all live in this community, and so why are we talking about our own community? We know it. Oh, because what if there were a student coming from another country who's going to spend a year here in your community? They're only going to be here for 1 year. And the parents are really, really nervous, and they've contacted us, and they've said, could you and your students help this student feel comfortable? So what are some things we could do before the student gets here? What if this was the big overarching focus for your STARTALK program? we're going to get ready to help someone who doesn't live here be comfortable living here. The person is coming from, guess what? The language that we're learning is this student's native language. This student is coming from Russia, and this is a Russian STARTALK program. What can we do to help this incoming Russian student feel comfortable in our community? Or Arabic, or Persian, Farsi, or Hindi, Urdu. Name your language, please. Would you have that conversation at your table? What's going to be different from what you had said before? All right, let's come back together in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Perfect. All right, let's again compare. And this list you have in your handout. You'll see it on page 3, arranged vertically, not horizontally as you see here, because we're going to do something more with it. You'll see it arranged vertically, same list. And again, this came from an actual activity where we were engaged, we were designing curriculum units. And this is what the group generated, just brainstormed. So they started with that first list, and they said, well, okay, we have the stuff, we have that second column, the culture, content, and language piece, but we really don't know, well, what are they going to do? What's going to be the learning episode that we could do? And in fact, what are maybe some of the possible assessments we could include as well, either formative or summative, checking for understanding in an episode level, or checking that I can do something with it at the end of my program level. So that's what we need to do next with this list. And again, I'm sure this reflects some of the same kinds of things you were talking about. But notice every single one of these are active. It's putting together. We didn't throw out this list. We did not throw out this list. I can't do much if I don't have words, if I don't have structures, if I don't have the functions to be able to use them somehow. That's why that column 2 is important. But what's more important is, and what are we going to do with them? And that's where having an authentic purpose helps me do something worthwhile with it. And this, again, great brainstorming. Well, they could do this, they could do this, they could do this. And you're thinking, beginning kids are going to do all these things? They're going to do it the way novices do. So when they're doing that interpretive where it says, find out what's different, do research, they're not going to an entire, 12-page, all words, no illustration article and saying, what can we learn? Because they would say nothing. They're going to a website from the community in Russia that this fictional student is coming from, and they're saying, just looking at the website, what are some conclusions you have of things that are the same or different? Because why tell them about the things that are the same? They don't need to be alerted to, guess what, it's the same here. They need to be alerted to the things that are different. So let's identify how many differences we can find just by looking at a website. Website is a lot of visual information. It's organized with some keywords that are already big, bright, and in a different color. I can skim and scan, and they know how to read those kinds of texts. Our learners do. They bring that already to the table. They don't have to be taught, this is how you read a website. They'd say, what? I know that. I so know that. Just let me at it. So that's how novices are going to be doing that research in the interpretive mode. So novices could do all of these things. Obviously, the presentational list is more practiced, but the interpersonal as well, coming from a lot of memorized chunks of language to actually have those kinds of conversations back and forth. The important thing now is to decide, we brainstormed this great list, but what if these things are too hard or too easy for them? Then I shouldn't use them in this program. They belong in when they come in the second year, or the third year, or the fourth year. I said my context is thinking about beginners. And that's where you see the next differentiating, because you're asking your curriculum template to decide what are the can-do statements that are guiding your program. What are the can-do statements that are guiding your program? Well, I go to my can-do statements, and maybe I go to my brainstorm list and I say, eventually I want to come up with my summative performance, but maybe I don't know yet what that is. I'm just brainstorming. Eventually I want to get there, but how do I get there? And how do I fill this piece out? I go to that brainstorm list I have, and I do my research. The way that I was envisioning this, and I know it's hard to look at those and instantly make the comparison, but as you're having the conversation, you know what you have in mind. This is the support the learner will have. This is what they're actually going to do. And as you go through that, you say, oh, well, it's set up like this, and then I'd have them do this, and I'd give them this as a support piece. Oh, well then, the way that they are exchanging emails is very novice mid. because all they're saying, they're writing down are memorized questions using those same question words. And so as I look down at the bottom here, NM, novice mid, it says I can answer some simple questions, because when I looked at interpersonal and I tried to find out which of the statements are the best match, well, there it says I can ask simple questions. Who, what, when, where. Oh yeah, that's what we've learned. Those are the kind of email questions. So they're going to ask questions when they look at that community website that they were researching. They're going to do a quick interpersonal exchange. They're going to write these, and they're going to get it back, and they're going to negotiate back and forth. They're going to write real quickly, well, where do you go shopping? Because I couldn't find that on the website. And when do you go to school? It looks like, you're coming home and it's really late, or it looks like you're coming home and it's only noon. Wow, I looked at your school website. Different things. So they can, again, the way that you set it up helps you make the determination, what level is it? I can get behind these. The third one there, practicing greeting and addressing peers. Novice mid, it says that. Decide who's going to do what to welcome the new student. Novice high, I can make plans with others. Oh, that's what they're doing. So to welcome the student, let's list, novices love to list, what are some things we should do? Let's do this, 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 and this. Okay, well, who's going to do what? That's our conversation now. Well, this, I like to do that. I'm going to do this. You? I like this. I'm going to do this. Oh, well, I like that too. Okay, we are going to do that. Now they're negotiating. They're making plans with others. When should we do this? How should we do this? How often should we do this? These are the questions they've already memorized. So I can look through the whole thing here and make my determination. Your learning plan says, now, some of these activities might be perfectly made for my episodes because they're really focused on one puzzle piece. They're a good formative piece of applying some language, some structures, some functions. Some of these you might say, wow, we brainstormed so well, we have the perfect summative. Here's how their conversation went. They looked at this list and they said, I can't just say, okay, my range is, let's say, novice mid to novice high, so we're just going to start with high. It's like, I kind of have to warm them up during those 3 weeks of my program, right? So they looked at this list and they said, well, early on, let's do some of those novice mid things then. That's logical. Let's start there. And over the course of 3 weeks, let's move them towards that intermediate as close as we can get, because we're working on this range. And when I'm at novice high, it means I can do intermediate. I can't sustain it independently. Okay? So that means I need to practice intermediate in order to get you to novice high. All right. So that's what they said. Then that top one is my perfect summative assessment. Or they didn't have anything that was pushing them beyond, and so they said, let's design something that takes them further along. That takes them further along. This was the thinking they did. You can see all of it for the various modes here as well. Here it is for the presentational. Again, here was the list. They just looked in the can-do statements, tried to do the match, tried to match it together, and they said, so where should our summative be? Some of these are just going to be good formative, good episode level in my learning plan. They're not my summative yet. And they said, well, it's those intermediate lows. If I'm targeting novice, mid, novice, high, I don't want to put a ceiling down here. I want to allow a higher ceiling because some students might get there, and now I have some range. I have some range within which you, individual students, can show me how well you can do certain things. Because students have strengths and weaknesses, mode by mode. Some students are going to do much stronger in interpersonal. Some are going to do much stronger in presentational writing. So if I always put the ceiling down here, oh, I don't want you to do anything more than novice high. It's like, I can do more. I can do more. Allow me. Also, this gets to that idea of, are you doing it more and more independently? So I'm allowing for that instead of saying, just do what I tell you, which is more the learning episode level. Okay? Questions, comments, does that make some sense? I'm just trying to really walk through the process of how do we bring this assessment and bring it to bear on your learning plan, because this is such a beautiful document. I saw a question over here. Yes, sir.
So if you're teaching a group of students that are novice,
Mm-hmm.
the intermediate low would be your main objective for the class?
In the performance terms, I want to know what that is. So I don't want to choose really low-level summative tasks, because I know they can do that. I want to know, can you surprise me? If I give you the opportunity, you might. My evaluation, though, is you're going to have probably a good novice performance, which is what I'm after. I'm after a good novice performance. If I'm targeting novice, mid-novice, high as that performance range on your STARTALK plans, again, I just caution about putting too much of a ceiling on it. Allow it to go a little bit beyond. Look at the statements, because remember, you've been practicing the content for 2, 3, 4 weeks. You've been practicing everything they need to know. It's not like just they walked up and real proficiency would be you just walked in and we had a conversation and wow, you're at intermediate low. You could just do that right here, right now. That's that independent control. We're not talking about that. Performance says we've practiced, I pushed you a little higher, you're going to be a good novice and I'm going to give you the opportunity because I didn't keep the task too tight.
So if the student gets to perform well at the intermediate low, that's an A+, let's say on a novice class.
So grading is a whole other issue. We'll talk at lunch. Because really it's not, we're not giving them the feedback that says an A+. That's trying to give a number or some representation of what this means. What it means is, what you said. Wow, you're at intermediate low. You're at intermediate low. A grading is a whole other issue. Comment back here and then here.
How do you find the concept of learning episode? Because I heard it yesterday and I'm struggling to understand.
I love that term. I love that term because as I think about how I designed my classes day to day, again, teaching middle school Spanish, I had a 50-minute bucket to fill, right? That's not one episode because they would never sit still for doing the same thing for 50 minutes, right? I mean, you don't. I have many episodes in this hour and a half that we have together. And I do a little formative check. I make you talk to each other. We haven't done anything written down yet. I know she's saying, where's the paper? We haven't done anything written down yet, but we can before you leave. So each episode is, well, what is the one target I have in mind? Is it this vocabulary? 5 words about places in a community, perhaps, right? Is it about, and I'm going to unwrap one in a moment. I'll take you across one of those lines. You'll see sort of one episode, okay? It's what am I doing in this? To me, it's no more than a half-hour chunk. In fact, I heard a comment, if I had a day-long STARTALK program, I might have 11 episodes. Right? So, I mean, no more than a half hour. No more than a half hour. Just. And I'm focusing during that time. Yes, I have other things going on, but my focus is I want you to learn these words. I want you to practice the structure. I want you to practice the function of asking questions. We're doing it in a variety of ways. I do some little quick checks, and then I do a formative check to know we can move on beyond this episode because you can do it. Does that help? Thank you. Thank you. Good question. Interpretive is different. Interpretive is different. I'm just going to say that. Because a lot of it is controlled by the text I put in front of you. So if there's not much there, it's like, well, how can I show that I'm at the advanced level if there's no inference to be made? It's a train schedule. There are no inferences. I'm sorry. There may be some, even in something as simple as a poster or an ad or an infographic, there may be some subtle inferences there, some cultural things. But for the novice, it's maybe really hard for them to pull those out. So be thinking about interpretive as I'm trying to make sure that the match of what I give you as text is supported by what you do well. So novices have to be able to access words and phrases to make meaning. Even in Chinese, there are certain characters that I recognize, and that's my go-to. That's my first orientation. Do any that I know, any that I recognize, okay, I'm getting a little sense. This is not about school because I don't see that school character anywhere. It's about... I was looking at infographic and I learned the one for pollution. I mean, just because it was here with air and here with water and here with plastic. So there were 3 different kinds of pollution. And I just saw the repetition of pollution. I said, I learned that 2-character word for pollution, just like that. And now I look for that everywhere, if indeed that's the context, right? And then what kind of pollution? And then I look for the word that goes with it. That's what novices do. So it doesn't mean that I can't give you anything that's too hard for you. It's not just text dependent. It's what's the task? What's the task I'm giving you? The task is related to my proficiency level.
So it seems that in this group, you have different skills. Like one can only read, the other one can do a more complex job. So is it good to keep all these levels together? Or in our assessment, the initial assessment, we should keep them separate?
By mode? By mode, I'm saying yes, because in my assessment, I want to know really what you can do. And so here's another thing with interpretive. if I make you write or speak to show that you understand, maybe you couldn't say it, maybe you couldn't write it, but you did understand. So that's why I want to be really careful with my mode in my assessment. In my classroom work, we're going to mix it. We're going to mix it. In my learning episode, we may have a text, and you may work with your partner to come up with what's one thing you could say about a community in Turkey by looking at this website. There's the interpretive task. Just come up with one thing. Because I'm here to coach you. This is not an assessment. This is just a quick formative. Can you pull that out interpretively? But by the end, I do want to be thinking about mode by mode by mode. If I'm understanding your question? Okay, good. So again, interpretive is a little bit different. Let's get into some specific details, and again, I want to go back to this piece right here. So your curriculum plan identifies those can-do statements. And again, I think it's a back and forth process. I don't know that you can just sit down and say, I am so brilliant, I know exactly my can-do statements, I know exactly my summative assessments, that's stage 2, that happens just in one moment. I think it's a lot of back and forth and back and forth. So we're taking you through that brainstorming piece to help you now decide, this is my summative piece. It's related to the can-do statements. And this is how then, once I have those learning goals, those big can-do statements, and I know what my summative assessments are, I can plan episode by episode. So what's my specific can-do? And we contextualize it. We put it into about communities. This is my unit. So it's not just generically, oh yeah, they're going to ask questions. They're going to be able to ask questions about where do we go in our community. That's this learning episode. Where do you go to? When do you? That's that learning episode. It's a very specific element within that can-do statement. The culture, content, and language, and there's where my formative assessments go. That's that evidence of learning. Checking for learning. Okay, we did these, and we're keeping in focus that part of the journey, because that's what your program is, formative assessments and summative assessments, and this is how it all comes together. This gets back to the learning episode piece. So as you're looking at this, you can see some episodes within one can-do statement about being able to ask questions. We're going to do a variety of things. I want to make sure that you can use some memorized questions. I want to make sure that you can ask some follow-up questions, and we're going to do some practice in pairs, okay? Each one of those could be an episode, each with its own formative assessment, leading up to that piece of can-do statement. But that's not yet my summative, isn't just asking questions. Because look at the summative on the far right. It's not just asking questions. We have to, with my partner, come to agreement on what this new student may need to know about our community. Oh, from all these things we've done, by the end of these 3 weeks about community, what did we learn that this student coming from Russia is going to need to know? I learned that one of the biggest differences is, and we better make sure they know about this is our interpersonal conversation. So I have taken that and backward designed and said, asking questions is a huge thing we better be practicing, and this is 3 episodes of how we're going to practice it. And there may be many times when we practice those memorized questions. Maybe it's just the when, maybe it's just the where, maybe it's the how often, right? Elaborating, adding details. Not just to say, should we say this? Yes. Should we say that? No. That's a pretty novice low conversation. And I'm working into the novice, mid-novice, high. So we want to say, how do you add where and when? So in an interpersonal, I might, if I say, well, we should tell them about this. Well, but where about shopping? Well, where? And how is it different? How many? Practice building on each other's statements and adding and adding and adding. That's how, again, we design our learning episodes to get them to the performance we want. And you can see asking for clarification. If all I have is, what? There's not a lot of good negotiating going on. Because that doesn't tell the person who just said something what's wrong. What did I not understand? If all I go is, I think I just said 3 beautiful sentences. What part didn't you understand? If all you do is, But if I now can do things like use some question words to clarify, like the part I didn't get was when? And the most novice just asks that, when? The better novice is going to say, when do we go shopping? When do they eat in Russia? When, where do they shop in Russia? Where do they buy food in Russia? When do we go to markets? Only Saturdays. When do they go to markets in Russia? Oh, every day. Oh, okay. Suddenly we're negotiating meaning. because I'm pointing out what I didn't understand. So we're going to practice those episode by episode, get some formative assessment, and work towards, again, if I do all of those episodes that are in the white frame to give me evidence of that blue function, I'm really confident that by the end of my program, you're going to do what's the summative on the far right. I've been checking and checking and checking and checking. You're ready. Okay, that's the big concept. On the top of now page 4, you'll see this little chart. And this is another critical piece, and it's going to, you're about to see a video you see in the middle there, where I'm going to ask you to look for evidence of this concept. Because one of the other things in my can-do statements for our hour and a half together was, what do we mean by that more independent use of language? I know you're really at that performance level that I'm targeting when it's not me doing all the work, but it's my learners doing it. I want the demonstration from you, not just you can always do it when I make it happen, when I structure it for total success. I need to start there, but I can't stay there. So let's think about that. So this is, you can see, I do, we do, you do. I do, we do, you do. The I do is the teacher. And you can see in that first column, as you're looking at yours as well, the teacher's heavily in control. It's the teacher doing everything. The teacher is setting it up, high level of support. I've created the activity. Here's the visual. We just memorized these questions. Go to it. The student, okay, I can do that. I respond. I'm a good parrot. I'm a good novice. I can do it. Not a lot of investment on my part as a student, but it's just a quick practice. Okay, you can do it. If every day, every episode is like that, I never know that they can really do it. It says I can do, not the teacher can make me do it. It's an I can statement, right? Keep that in mind. In the middle then, those two is when we're starting to tip over from me doing it to you, the learners, doing it. This is the heart of the formative assessment right here, those middle two columns. And that's why I do those quick learning checks. Can I push a little more control out to you and keep less tight by me? That's the we do. That's the we do. And once I feel like you're really pushing yourself along and you're able to handle this, I can let go even more as the teacher. I can start to step back a little bit. It's like they're on this fulcrum, right? They're on the plank. And if I'm always holding on down here, well, yeah, you get the performance, and I want to be able to slowly let go of it until, wow, you're doing it all by yourself. You don't need me anymore. And my formative is, where are you? Are you still tipping back and forth? And sometimes I push them this way and they go, no, I can't. And I quick grab on before they fall, they fall off and it's a disaster. Okay, here, I intervene a little bit. But that's the we do. I'm trying to see how much control I can let go of. The far right then, and that again is the heart of the formative. The far right is getting closer to the summative point now. Look what you can do without me. Look what you can do. So this is another important filter in my assessing, in my learning episodes. How am I letting go? How am I letting you take more and more control and understand, right? And probably I would put then off on the far right a summative, where it's just basically, here's a performance, have the conversation, try to come to agreement about what we should tell this new student about our community. Go. And it's being recorded, and I'm going to give you feedback on how well you can do it as a good novice, mid-novice, high person. That's the range I'm looking for. I'm going to give you feedback. Are you in that range or not? Wow, you're above it. Oh, you're not quite there yet. Oh, you're right, spot on, making good progress. There's my grade. There's my feedback, right? Where are you in that range on that summative assessment? That's kind of off on the far right even. Okay? So let's go to a classroom. As you see the whole thing, I want you to be reflecting on that top of page 4. That's why I wanted you to have that on your paper. So you can keep that in mind. Look in the middle. We're going to go into a classroom. And in that classroom, it's a Japanese classroom. You're saying, well, that's not a STARTALK language. That's true. So you're not going to focus on the language. You're going to focus on how is the teacher moving from I do to we do to you do. So I want you to take some notes as you're listening. It's not an immersion program. She sees her students almost every day of the week. Some are near native speakers, heritage speakers. Some are not at all. And I'm going to kind of skip around in the video clip, which on page 6, all the resources I've been referring to, you'll see it says the Annenberg CPB series, and you can watch the entire video going to that particular link. Margaret Dyer Peterson in San Francisco. Here's her 4th grade class. Let's look for evidence of I do, we do, you do. Here she goes.
起きます。おはようございます。顔を洗います。顔を洗います。朝ごはんを食べます。お腹すいた。
I wanted them to walk away with being able to know the vocabulary to talk about their daily routine.
コーンフレークを食べます。おいしい。
The other objective was for them to be able to really understand some of the differences and similarities between Japanese culture and the daily routine and daily activities and American culture.
飲みます。飲みます。そしてお風呂に入ります。
It's all about. The research has shown that when the kids are actually moving their body, I'm getting in the bodily kinesthetic multiple intelligence here, when they're moving their body and they're saying it, it helps them retain it or it helps them remember it.
朝ごはんを食べます。朝ごはんを食べます。朝ごはんを食べます。朝ごはんを食べます。歯を磨きます。歯を磨きます。歯を磨きます。歯を磨きます。出かけます。
Language and culture are inseparable. They are so intertwined that if you try to learn one without the other, then you're doing a disservice to the language or the culture.
掃除をします。並べます。皆さん覚えてますか？並べます。カルタはしない。カルタしないです。今は並べます。並べます。いいですか？はい。起きます。起きます。起きます。はい。顔を洗います。顔を洗います。顔を洗います。起きます。
So they're hearing it for the 3rd or 4th time today, and they are having to find the picture based on what I'm saying and line it up in the sequence that the daily routine would happen. So there's some addressing the logical intelligence where the mathematical logical person would think, oh, well, I wash my face first, and then I eat breakfast, and then I go to school. Plus, it's the listening comprehension.
そして皆さん、紫ワークシートを出してください。紫ワークシートを出してください。何か言います。例えば、顔を洗います。言います。1番、顔を洗います。そして皆さんは1番書いてください。2番書いてください。3番書いてください。1、2、3、4、5、6、8、8まで。いいですか？はい。はい。はい、やりましょう。はい。1番、寝ます。1番、寝ます。
The worksheet activity was formative assessment. It's my way to, in the middle of the lesson, gauge how many kids have gotten it, how many kids still need some work on it, to be able to see what they are coming away with in the lesson.
はい。はい、よくできました。いいですか？
Vocabulary, I need to do more comprehensible input, and I need to do more guided practice with them.
はい、どうぞ。
勉強しています。
勉強します。はい、よくできました。どうぞ。
We've done a lot of comprehensible input. We've given them multiple chances to hear it and to say in unison with the rest of the class what these different daily routines are.
はい、これは何ですか？
This part of the activity lets them say it.
どうぞ。
晩ご飯を食べます。
はい、晩ご飯を食べます。よくできました。
If we're looking at this from a Japanese cultural standpoint, the bath would not occur in the morning, the bath would be at night. So, the kid brought that to light, and then the kids moved over to that section.
お風呂します。
お風呂に入ります。
お風呂に、say it again.
お風呂に入ります。
お風呂に入ります。
はい、よくできました。ありがとう、レイチェルさん。さん、よくできました。よくできました。これから時計をセットしてください。そしてこれを言ってください。例えば6時に晩ご飯を食べます。6時に晩ご飯を食べます。いいですか？はい、どうぞやってみてください。
一時弁当食べます。弁当食べます。私は
The bilingual kids were instructed to make it not on the hour or half hour or quarter hour, to really get the minutes down to the minute detail, because the way you pronounce Japanese for minutes changes. For 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, the pronunciation goes 1分、2分. It's complicated. And that was to challenge those guys.
That's 5時半。朝ごはんは何時に食べますか？7時？はい、わかりました。じゃあ、私は朝ごはんを8時半に食べます。じゃあ、勉強は何時頃にしますか？勉強。4時に勉強しますか？はい。はい。はい。私は9時に寝ます。グレタは何時に寝ますか？
This is an activity that I have done with them on a number of different occasions
グレタも9時に寝ますか？はい。
with different props and different materials. So who's A? And they raise their hand. Who's B? And they raise their hand to make sure they remember who they are. Then when I say tsugi or next, they have to rotate. They make one rotation going in the opposite direction. So the A will go this way and the B will go this way. And then they'll have a new partner and then a new material to practice the conversation with. And we do this through several rotations so that they can have multiple chances to practice always having a new partner, always having new material.
So let's stop there. And would you talk at your table, and again, reflecting on what you saw from just several episodes in one class, several different learning episodes in one class period, how was she moving from the I do, we do, you do? Talk at your tables. All right, I'm going to ask you to come back together. Come back together in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Perfect, perfect. So, what's one example of an I do, the teacher in control?
So the time she model, like she was modeling what, the different activities, saying the activities and modeling, and students were watching.
She was modeling, and at one point she was saying it, and they were just repeating. I do, I do, I do. Very little that they had to really think, right? Very little, no student control. How about, where was she starting to make the transition into some we do's? Some we do. They were teacher and student together. Can you think of a specific example?
Like morning? Morning. Wake up, work.
Okay. Were they actually, she was just at one point just showing the picture, and they had to say what it was. So she wasn't even saying anything other than just holding up the picture. So her prompt had faded from I'm saying it and you repeat it to do you know it? Each one of these are different kinds of assessment. Some were just a quick learning check. Can you pronounce the words? I say it, you repeat it. Yes, you can pronounce the words. Okay, great. Can you remember the word if you see the picture? Yes. Okay, you have that. Great. So when I think I have all the evidence that I need, that's the formative assessment I'm going to put down on my learning plan, because I need to get to that point before I can say, you've got the words. She wasn't even ready at that point. What else did she do in that we do portion?
Students and teachers, they were doing it together.
They were doing it together, so that was a little more on the teacher side. Some of it wasn't even spoken. She was getting more to an individual level.
For me, she had two types of you do activities. One you plural and one you singular.
Yes, thank you. Tell us.
And the you plural was very effective because working at something with a partner is a lot easier. You don't have that anxiety. But she was observing. She was not really present in that you do. But they still got help from the partner or the...
And they weren't even using language to show they understood. The paired work, they were just moving the pictures around. Yes. Oh, you said this first, and then this, and what, they don't take a bath then? I would take a bath in the morning. Oh, I didn't hear that one until now. This is where I'm putting the card. Oh, okay, I have to listen, and she can just observe a good formative check. You got it, no, you didn't so much. Ooh, we're really in trouble over here. Okay, we're not quite done yet. But there's a wonderful formative check. Have them manipulate the cards. No production of language. Total understanding is being checked, right? And then they went to the individual level with them on a sheet. Individually, here's number 1, here's number 2. I mean, it's just, I love this clip because there's so much there that's so rich in what she's doing. She's maintaining target language. She's doing this gradual release to let the students do more and more. She's got formative checks. She even used the word clearly in her head, right? So this is a great one to use with your teachers as well, to say, what do we mean when we hold this up and we say, this is a learning episode? Describe how many different learning episodes we see in this 1/2 hour of a class, right? Back to your question. Okay, excellent. And as you said, she was moving more and more towards the we can do it all by ourselves eventually piece. So great processing of that. Let's go again to the bottom of your chart there, and let's just be filling it in, as you see I did on page 5 there. I filled it in for you. Excuse me, page 4. So if that is my learning goal, remember you saw that early on, I can ask some questions. That's a good novice mid can-do statement. In this learning episode, we want to ask questions about communities. So now we're kind of reviewing the things we talked about this morning. It says, well, what kind of questions? I can ask questions about communities. Well, there are all types. There's a whole hierarchy of questions. The PowerPoint and the handout are on, well, they will be available post-conference then. The STARTALK has them, so you'll be able to access this. But this hierarchy of questions, am I only asking yes, no questions, either or questions? Oh, I'm kind of keeping you at novice if that's all I do. Because that's what the novice can do really well. I want to get you up towards that higher level. I better raise my kinds of questions. What kinds of questions do I want you to be able to ask? What kind of questions am I asking? Are they the what, when, where, who, why, how, describe? Now I'm moving over more into that intermediate realm. Tell me more. Can you explain, give an example? Tell me about a time when now is advanced. That's storytelling. Tell me about a time when. So this hierarchy of questions can take me all the way from novice to advanced. I'm thinking, okay, I'm in my novice mid, novice high range. I'm probably not going to ask the ones at the bottom. I'm focusing on the ones more in the middle and the top of this realm. And there I go. We're going to learn how to form questions. That's something they need to learn in this episode. And they're going to practice these 2 questions. What do you do at the mall? What do you do at the beach? What do you do at the park? What do you do at the bike store? What do you do at the, right? And where do I? Where do I swim? Where do I shop? Where do I buy food? Where do I mail a letter? That's all we're working on in this episode. Right? In a previous episode 3 days ago, you learned a bunch of places. This episode, we're just practicing that piece right there. Places in the community, I want to make sure they come back. Reviewing of daily activities, because that's what do I do there. And so now I have to put in some formative assessments. I'm going to show you some examples of some formative assessments that could go in that last column, that last blank, what we saw right there. My checks for learning. My checks for learning. So interpersonal, the key thing, am I interacting and negotiating meaning? And you'll see now on page 5 some examples of how I might go through checking for understanding. Here's a whole list that I put into some learning checks, some formatives, and some potential summatives. Again, a brainstormed list around this idea of community that I could do all of these kinds of things. What I want to take you to is what it could look like. What it could look like as we're practicing an information gap. I don't know exactly what you're going to say, but we're going to practice this structure, asking, where do you want to go and what do you want to do? And the formulaic that a good novice can follow is, I want to go to because I want to Novices, give me a pattern, give me the blanks, and I can fill in multiple different responses. And now I'm personalizing my response. I don't know exactly where you want to go or what you want to do there. I don't know. Otherwise, I wouldn't ask you, right? If I already know the answer, why am I asking you? So it's not about, please describe your clothing. It's like, I think you can all see what I'm wearing. This is kind of a dumb activity. Why are we doing this? There's nothing interpersonal here. But we can change it to be something, again, where I don't know what you're going to say. We're practicing in a very controlled, very I-do, teacher-controlled way, right? So let's move it from this. And the illustrations are there just because if you don't give me some remembrance of what vocabulary I control, I'm going to forget it all. There are no words here. Just the ideas are there. Oh, so do you want to go to a concert? Yes, I want to go to a concert because I want to hear cool music. There. From that prompt and those words, which would all be in the target language, we can have a conversation. Where do you want to go? I want to go to the beach because I want to swim. No, because I want to listen to music. You listen to music at the beach? Yes, there's a cool band tomorrow, and I want to listen to music at the beach tomorrow. Oh, I didn't know. Right? You don't know. It's going to be a surprise. Or we'll negotiate. At the beach? Oh, no, I want to go to the auditorium because I want to hear the concert. Okay. You have at your tables, I spread around questions in an envelope. If anyone did not get this little slip of paper, here's some extras here. Anyone not get one? I put them at your tables, I think. Maybe I missed you all. There you go.
Yeah, we
You got one. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? There you go. They're right next to you there. There they are. I dropped them while you were doing your last turn and talk. Okay. There are extras up here if you didn't get one. So the way this activity, this is taking it a little more in the we do and less of the I do. Less and less of the I do. So these are things that we will have all practiced. The questions that you have here, this is all, again, how do we sustain a conversation? Not just where do you want to go, what do you want to do, but let's keep it going. To keep it going, you can see the directions there. We're going to partner up. So for this, I want you to stand up and take the piece of paper, but put it down to your side because it's in an envelope, so you can't see them. So in a moment, this is going to disappear. So let's stand up, play along. Thank you. Thank you. The way it works is I want you to practice the conversation about, so tomorrow we're going to pretend that we have an entire free day, and while we're pretending to be on this trip to this community in Russia, what are some things we should do? And what should we choose that we're going to convince the whole class that this is what we want to do? This is what we want to do. So we have to explore some things maybe that there are to do in this community in Russia, some things that would be interesting, why we'd want to do it. Our program is taking place in July. What can we do in July in this community in Russia? Let's have this conversation and keep it going. So the way that it keeps going is I try to think of the questions, those memorized questions we've practiced in earlier learning episodes. Let's practice those questions now in this more you do form. And if you run out of questions, you can't keep the conversation going before I say stop, just pull a question out of the envelope. So today I didn't create 60 envelopes, but I put them on a piece of paper. So just take a little quick look and read one of those questions that would have been on its own little slip of paper. Each one would be on a separate slip of paper in an envelope, and you pull them out. Okay. So ready? Find someone maybe from a different table. Just turn and talk to someone at a different table. And again, the prompt was, what should we agree to do on a free day in this community in Russia that we've been studying for 2 weeks because we don't know what we want to convince the whole class to do. Ready? Turn and talk, and I'll tell you when to stop. All right, if you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. That means time's up, time's up. Obviously, we do this in a variety of different ways in a classroom, but while you didn't have envelopes, I did see many of you every now and then kind of looking here. So over here, I saw this group do that. I'm just pretending. Mm-hmm. I saw this group look 3 times. So how many are left in the envelope? If there were 8 in all, 3 were taken out. There are 5 that are left, so their score is a 5. So only 3 times did they have to look in and pull those out. They had a 5. Over here, they only pulled out 1. So they have a... And this group pulled out 5 questions, so their score was 3. But now I'm going to ask you, not really, but in class, you would move around just like Margaret Dyer Peterson had them do. You'd find a new partner, and you'd see if you can beat your score. But now, who has the advantage? This group. They read 5 questions. They only read 1. They're going to try to remember everything that kept it going, and they only have 1 that's a new question. They have 5 in their head that they just read. So you put the questions back in the envelope, find a new partner, and see if you can keep the conversation going a second time, a third time, a fourth time. Maybe the first time it's only for a minute. Maybe the next time, let's see if we can go for a minute, 15 seconds. Can you do it for a minute and a half? Well, okay, the big drum roll, you can do it for 2 minutes, right? This is, again, part of that I do, we do, you do. And as you sit back at your seat, look back at page 2, please, for me. We're coming near the end of our time. Look back at page 2. Thank you. As you look at page 2, I didn't have you write anything down there because I wanted you to experience some things before you were ready to fill this out. This is what I want you to think about during your lunch, on your trip home, as you're planning your STARTALK program and thinking about your learning episodes. I can't tell you what we just did is a formative activity. What we just did is a summative activity. What we just did is a learning check. Because I don't know when you're going to say this is the right time to use it. I don't know if your students are working in the novice, mid, novice, high, intermediate, low, intermediate, mid, intermediate, high to advanced, low. Any of these tools I could use at any level, but you have to make the decision, is this the right tool to use right now as just a learning check, as a more, I can use things in this way because I'm trying to apply 2 new things that I've learned? Or is it my summative assessment? Maybe this is my summative assessment. Because you are novice enough that you need a little more support. Instead of just saying, have that conversation without any questions to pull out as a safety net, just have the conversation. Are you at that level? Can you do that all by yourselves? I would have enough formative assessment evidence that I could make that decision, which is why I can't tell you that each one of these has to go into one of those buckets. That's your choice. That's your choice. Does that make some sense? We've given you the filters, I hope, to be able to do that. Let me just do one last piece to close out, and that is getting to the rubric, because many times we talked about the feedback piece. And I just want to talk conceptually about the rubric, first of all. The way it was designed was to say, what performance am I looking for? In an interpersonal conversation, what do I want? A rubric is supposed to help give me a model for what the performance should look like. I want an interpersonal conversation that looks like the right-hand column. That's what we're going to spend 3 weeks moving to. Because right now, it's all I do. I ask you questions and you respond. And I can pull that language out of you. I want it to be that you and another student are having a conversation and you're exhibiting all those behaviors on the right. So as we start the program, what do I see? I see what's happening on the left. Let's move away from those kinds of behaviors in a conversation and move to what's on the right. You could do this by looking at what is the range I'm looking at in my STARTALK program to create my feedback tool. We did this actually with the Hindi program. They were trying to get their heritage learners from intermediate high to advanced low. So they looked at advanced low and they said, well, what would that look like in the interpersonal? What should we see? And then they said, what are we seeing right now in the students? And they put that on the left. And guess what the students said when they showed them the rubric then? They said, oh, well, we could totally do that. We just would never think to do it. We just think you wanted that out of us. We just thought we could kind of slip by and kind of just say a few, nonsense things. No, if you want to be advanced low, you got to do what's on the right. Oh, okay. And their behavior just zoomed. Because suddenly it's like, oh, that's all. That's what you're asking from me? I can do that. Look at everything that's there. We have done every one of those things formatively. We could practice those. So when and in formative assessment, I might pull out one little piece. So in one learning episode, maybe we're just going to be practicing on, do you give single word responses or do you give responses with details, reasons, and explanations? Remember that was one of my can-dos. You can elaborate and give more details. So I'm going to give you feedback as we're doing this pair activity, maybe what Margaret Dyer-Peterson was having them, the you go this way, you have a new partner. I'm just going to go around and give you a 1, a 2, or a 3 based on that one piece. Did you elaborate or did you just give a quick short answer, just yes, no, 3:30, or did you elaborate? At 3:30, I take a bath in my bathroom and use a towel. Wow, you get a real 3. Versus a 1 would be, when do you take a bath? Just give the time, right? So this is how we can go around and give formative feedback, teach them the feedback tool, and then now I can use the entire thing in my summative performance because you know it. You know what the performance is. Thank you so much. And the rest of the materials that you see here are just some examples in the presentational realm as well. And there are other resources on page 6 for you. But I hope that we have answered your questions about how you're going to fill out your learning plan and really understand that idea of formative assessment episode by episode so that it adds up to your summative assessment. I would say that I have my formative evidence that you can do these things the way you've been participating, the questions you've been asking. So I'm satisfied that you're going to walk out of here saying, I can do what we said you will be able to on page 1 of your handout. All right? If you don't believe that you can, come and see me. We'll have another continuing session here, but I think you're in good shape. Thank you so much for spending this time.